gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Anna Fotyga, Polish member of the European Parliament. On behalf of the ECR, I would like to welcome all distinguished participants to this conference and amazing audience. Thank you very much indeed for coming. With this event, two parts event, we would like to commemorate the brave resistance of Georgian society and whole Europe, in particular my region, Central and Eastern Europe, the Russian aggression against Georgia. For the first time, Russian Federation decided to invade the sovereign country for the same time, first time after a really long time. The lead theme are words delivered by the late President of Poland, Lech Kaczyński, who together with four other Central and Eastern European leaders decided to go to Tbilisi to show solidarity of leaders. There were four presidents of Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania and Estonia, as well as Prime Minister of Latvia, going in August 2008 to Tbilisi to defend territorial integrity, so actually independence of this country, because Russian troops wanted to take much more of Georgia. His famous, President Kaczynski's famous words were, today Georgia, tomorrow Ukraine, then Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, and then maybe my country, Poland. And this sentence is the lead of today's event. We would like to discuss security of Europe, maybe more, security of whole world. Let me give the floor to President of Estonia, President Ilves, participant of this special trip to Tbilisi.
Good afternoon, Jim Mulberry. My involvement with Georgia began already when I became foreign minister in 1997 and has continued throughout. His involvement increased dramatically when I was invited to join a group of Europeans and Americans advising President Saakashvili back in 2004. It was a time when Russia was repeatedly provoking Georgia with shelling, harsh rhetoric, and threats. In February of 2007, I sat in the front row of the Munich Security Conference, along with Angela Merkel, John McCain, Javier Solana, and Viktor Yushchenko. His face still scarred from a Russian poisoning attempt in 2004. It was when Putin gave his famous speech attacking the West. Old Europe, as it were, was in shock, but they did not take heed. 2 months later, when my country was subjected to massive cyber attacks, the first time that cyber fulfilled von Clausewitz's definition of war, the continuation of policy by other means, NATO didn't believe us. By 2008 spring, tensions in Georgia were rising. Russia had sent its railway troops to the breakaway statements to repair the railroads. That is always a bad sign. Railroads, as we know too well from the Ukraine war, is for Russia the primary mode of military transport. Meanwhile, NATO had invited that same Vladimir Putin, who a year earlier had thrown the gauntlet down to the West, accusing it of aggressive intent and unipolarity, told President George Bush that Ukraine was not even a country. We know the outcome. The so-called compromise said that Ukraine and Georgia would someday become members. I thought from that moment on it was a green light to Russia. The West would not stand up and Russia could do what it wanted. The next Friday, August 8th, the Russians counterattacked and invaded Georgia. The morning after that, President Kaczynski called extremely upset. We drafted a declaration calling on the EU and NATO to step in and sent it to the other two Baltic countries, and since I knew her, also to the President of Finland. The latter, incidentally, declined to join us. The statement inter alia said that we regretted the failure to give Ukraine and Georgia back, and that we saw it as a green light for Russia to invade. We also said, it is a litmus test for the credibility of the EU and NATO to solve the conflict in its immediate neighborhood and to prove for all EU and NATO members, aspirant countries, and democratic partners that it is worth being members and partners in these organizations. The statement received no response. The next day, a furious President Kaczynski called me back and asked what we should do. We got away various options, and then I said, half jokingly, well, we could always fly them. Kaczynski replied, I'll send you a plane to pick you up in the morning. So began our 5 presidents trip to Tbilisi on 11 August 2008. We wrote to the Russians and asked if we had permission to land. They never responded. This led to a furious exchange between President Kaczynski and the pilot of the plane, but it ultimately decided we would fly to Ganja, Azerbaijan, because the pilot did not want to risk flying into Georgia and be shot down by the Russians. So we ended up flying to Ganja, Azerbaijan. In the meantime, we had contacted President Aliyev, who had sent a fleet of Mercedes to pick us up and drove us to the mountain pass, where we were met by Georgian cars to drive us down. It was dark, but fortunately a waxing gibbous moon, so it was light enough to drive. We drove without lights because the convoy was afraid of being attacked by the Russians. And slowly we made it down to Tbilisi and to Rustaveli Square, from which Russian troops were a mere 40 kilometers away. President Sarkozy was there as well as president of the EU, or the head of the presidency. We sought a meeting to consult with him. President Kaczynski went to talk to him. The lady came back, pulled me aside, and said, when he had asked to meet Sarkozy, the latter replied, I'll meet with you, but not the little one. President Sarkozy was in Tbilisi, shuttling between Tbilisi and Moscow to develop a plan. The plan was a 6-point plan that includes as point 4 the complete removal of all Russian troops from Georgian territory. Until then, the EU would freeze the partnership and cooperation agreement between the European Union and the Russian Federation. Well, in the subsequent 3 weeks, there was no movement of troops. They stayed. President Sarkozy proposed that we forget and ignore the freeze on the partnership and cooperation agreement between the EU and Russia and go back to business as usual. And so, at the end of the meeting, the European Union decided that despite the invasion, we would go back to the status quo ante, the partnership and cooperation agreement would be restored, and that, I guess, that the troops would remain in Georgia. That is where we are to this day, 15 years later. The troops are there, and nothing has changed. Oh, I should also mention that in 2009, the United States, following Sarkozy, under President Obama, decided that, well, let's let bygones be bygones, we'll just let the Russians stay there and let us start a reset policy, which in fact was the policy of the United States from 2009 until 2014. A year after the 2014 invasion and annexation of Crimea, Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, signed the agreement to undertake Nord Stream 2. I think that's about all I need to say.
We would like to thank President of Estonia, the former President of Estonia, Ilves, and now there is another pre-recorded message, especially prepared for this event, President of Lithuania, Valdas Adamkus.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted today to address this international conference. 15 years ago, we witnessed the return of the dark times of 20th century to the European continent. With the solidarity of my region, with unity and leadership, we were able to save Georgian sovereignty. We still need solidarity, unity, and leadership in our part of the world. There cannot be the gray zones, different security guarantees. Such gray zones always provokes aggressors. Leaders cannot afraid to bold decisions and visions. And for example, in 2008, in Bucharest, we had a strategic foresight that without Georgia and Ukraine being in NATO under the umbrella of collective defense, we will continue witness an aggression. I remember the voices of hesitation regarding accession of Poland or Lithuania to NATO in the 1990s. Last week in Vilnius, capital of Lithuania, member of the EU and NATO, we hosted the leaders of the free world. Today, Poland delivers stability and security to Europe. And Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova are the part of our European family, and I am strongly convinced that the Ukrainian victory is the only way to guarantee that Europe will be whole, free, and at peace. Good luck.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of leaders standing during this important rally in Tbilisi, the third president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, is now in prison in Georgia in very fragile state of health. But he was able to present a letter, especially drawn to this conference, asking his closest co-worker and friend, Georgi Halide, to read it.
Russians, Putin, tried everything to silence President Saakashvili, but today we are here to hear his address to you. In 2008, Bucharest, we were thrown to the wolves despite heroic efforts led by Lev Kaczynski and the Polish delegation that tried till the last minute to get us MEP. German position was main harbor. They teamed up with Sarkozy, who was earlier sending signals to me, but changed his position under German pressure and told US that they could not accept Georgia because of territorial conflicts. They were ready to consider Ukraine, but there was one thing they will be adding to the Ukraine's issue, provided that the most Ukrainians wanted it. Only 20% of the Ukrainian population were for NATO. In February 2008, I was invited for the official visit to the White House, but 1 hour before I entered the Oval Office, I was called by Merkel and told that no matter what Bush would promise me, she would be blocking. Bush did not take this seriously, as never in history Germany has blocked anyone whom America had wanted to join. What is happening now? Georgia has been decoupled from Ukraine and left out in cold with very stern language of Vilnius communique. And even more, President Biden directly addressed the Georgian people with a call to fight and make their voice heard, together with Belarus and Moldova. Needless to say, countries without NATO aspiration. Georgia President and Prime Minister were not invited to the summit, and these are all clear signals. I'm extremely grateful to all the members of the European Parliament demanding my liberation from the pseudo-judicial process, and President Zelensky expelled the Georgian ambassador until my issue is solved. Please keep fighting for Ukraine, Georgia, and me. Thank you.
Now, let us give the floor to Jarosław Kaczyński, Deputy Prime Minister of Poland, the twin brother of the late President Lech Kaczyński.
Szanowni Państwo, już niedługo 15. rocznica dramatycznych wydarzeń w Łodzi, w Tbilisi, wydarzeń, które stwarzały zagrożenie dla bezpieczeństwa i dla niepodległości Gruzji, stwarzały zagrożenie dla całej Europy, a może nawet dla całego świata. Mój świętej pamięci brat, Lech Kaczyński, ówczesny prezydent Rzeczypospolitej, podjął szybką decyzję, dosłownie kilka chwil po tym, jak dowiedział się od pana prezydenta Saakaszwilego o tym, że Rosja zaatakowała, iż nie będzie ograniczał się do oświadczeń, że podejmie akcję. Rozpoczęła się operacja. Nie bez trudności, trzeba było lądować poza Gruzją, w Azerbejdżanie, ale przy dobrej woli i pomocy prezydenta Alijewa bardzo szybko delegacja przedostała się do Gruzji. Tam doszło do słynnego wiecu na placu w centrum Tbilisi i do przemówienia, w trakcie którego mój brat sformułował znane dziś w Europie słowa, może nawet znane w świecie, o tym, że najpierw Gruzja, później Ukraina, później pewnie państwa bałtyckie, a później może nawet i czas na Polskę. I ta przepowiednia niestety się sprawdziła. Mamy dzisiaj wojnę na Ukrainie, atak Rosji na Ukrainę, wojna trwa już przeszło 500 dni. Ukraina dzielnie się broni i to jest potwierdzenie tej diagnozy i potwierdzenie całej polityki, której sercem była gotowość do przeciwstawienia się Rosji. Odrzucenie złudzeń narodowego państwa, odrzucenie złudzenia, że ono się zmieniło, że przestało być państwem imperialistycznym. Dziś to złudzenie jest coraz szerzej, chociaż nie przez wszystkich jeszcze do końca odrzucane i trzeba z tego wyciągać wnioski. Trzeba wyciągać wnioski, które mają praktyczny charakter. Te wnioski być może zbyt wolno, nie do końca zdecydowanie, ale jednak są wyciągane. I to jest ta wielka zmiana. Wielka zmiana, której symbolicznym początkiem były te właśnie wydarzenia i to przemówienie.
Bardzo dziękujemy. Former Prime Minister of Latvia, Ivars Godmanis.
Well, I could say that 15 years back and now, no big difference, the war. It was war and it is a war. And I have to say that Latvia, Lithuania, and even Estonia and Finland, we have a common very greatest misfortune, because geographically we have a neighbor who is not changing its mind to do anything but not to build its country inside, not to improve the quality of life. No, it's the second thing. First thing is attack, fight, and this is absolutely dramatic thing. And it looks like that it's not just the policy of the governments. And you will see opinion poll results, and it looks like it's very deep somehow in this empire's thinking. Because this neighbor is not taking into account anything, just, of course, for that reason. And my colleagues, my former colleagues in the European Parliament, and also now, I do hope that you will do the best also to play a role, how to improve even military assistance. I mean, to help financially military, because there is no other way out. The difference between Western Europeans and Eastern Europeans is very simple. The Western Europeans were not, after 1945, at the time, 1945, under the complete Stalin's regime, and then later all those regime, political, economically. For that reason, it is quite understandable that they are not feeling with their own skin what it means. We who have lived experience under this, we know it's absolutely necessary for those, I would say, misfortune neighbors, like we in the Baltics and Georgia and all those who are in Caucasus, to find a way to be united on this national level. Because the problem is always such one that they will find out the places, they will find out the ways how to split. Is it so absolutely not possible to find a common national Georgian way? Because actually it's quite clear, the neighbor is such that if you will be not united, then it will be a problem. We Latvians and Estonians and Lithuanians, thanks God, we found out this way. And doesn't matter if we have democracies, we are, fighting politically with each other every day. But if it's coming to the question, what is our attitude to those guys in the East who want just one thing, to take us, control us, push us? The history and reality shows us that our, let me say, neighbor, he is with completely different philosophy, with completely different attitude to the life, and there's no possibility to find even a compromise. This is tendency. And for that reason, I wish also existing politicians to be very tough. We could understand nobody wants war. Who wants war? Nobody. But the war is now. The war is now. Okay, somebody could say it's outskirts. What means outskirts? What means Ukraine is outskirts? Nearby, very near for us. This is what I have to say to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. We have the ambassador, tireless ambassador of Ukraine to the EU, His Excellency Всеволод Chensov. So I propose now the short Ukrainian contribution to our event.
Thank you very much. We are talking about not Georgian or Ukrainian crisis or war, as some people still in this capital and other capitals tend to call those tragic. And Russia has an empire which is now very close to its end. There is an agony of this empire, and we can see it already with our naked eye. It needs the war. The empire is doomed, but to prolong its time, to conservate its regime, it's entering into bigger and smaller war. But the biggest mistake of Putin regime this time was mere miscalculation on all possible dimensions. It sent us very clear signal that we should not slow down. We should keep united. We should increase the pressure on Russia. And I'm talking about all possible ways to keep this pressure, sanction pressure, providing more military assistance to Ukraine. If we let Russia to succeed now, tomorrow might not come, because Russia is already today infiltrating in your political systems, in your economic systems, and I'm talking to you as Europeans. And you need to take it into account and take it seriously.
Thank you, Excellency, for this message. And now we come to distinguished panel, high-ranking American diplomat, friend of Central and Eastern Europe, well known to many of us now, providing his expertise also quite frequently here in the European Parliament and elsewhere. I would like to once more to reintroduce to you David Kramer.
Anna, thank you very much. It's great to be back here in Brussels. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being here. It's an honor to be up here with you. In contrast to the views I sense of the majority of the population in Georgia, I'm saddened to see the behavior and rhetoric of the Georgian government these days. Rhetoric that sounds like it's coming more from Moscow than from Tbilisi. Efforts to improve ties with Moscow when virtually every other country in the West is trying to sanction and isolate the Putin regime. And so it is with a heavy heart that I follow events in Georgia and hope to be there in a month and a half for a conference to bring more attention to the situation there. The attitudes in the United States, because I imagine those are of considerable interest to people here. I was just mentioning to my colleagues that a recent poll of Americans showed that 65% support continued arming of Ukraine. Americans stand with Ukraine. And this idea of Ukraine fatigue, I would argue, is overstated. If anyone's tired of the war in Ukraine, it is Ukrainians. No one wants the war to end sooner than Ukrainians. They are the ones fighting and tragically dying every day, but they are also confident that they will win. And they do not support territorial compromises and concessions, nor do they trust Putin with any agreements, and with good reason. U.S. interest, it is in Europe's interest, of course it's in Ukraine's interest, to defeat the Russian forces and to give the Ukrainians the ability to do so. The repercussions of that will redound to the benefit, obviously, first and foremost for Ukraine, but for Belarus as well, for Georgia, for every country in the region, for Russia someday. And so I hope that we will see at next year's NATO summit in Washington a formal invitation to Ukraine to become a member. And not simply saying when conditions are met, whatever the hell that means, but to actually provide a timeline so that Putin does not have a de facto veto over Ukraine's NATO aspirations. So let's support Ukraine in what is not just their battle, but our battle too. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, David, for this very powerful message to us. And now I would like to give the floor to a very distinguished Lithuanian diplomat, nowadays chairing, engaged heavily in parliamentary dimension on foreign affairs in Seimas, Lithuanian Seimas, but during the time of war and earlier, one of closest co-workers to President Valdas Adamkus. We used to cooperate closely then, and we continue this. But the floor is yours.
Thank you, Minister. Well, many words about me. I'm just another Lithuanian, like Petras, like Jozas. We're all fighting the same fight. Baltics and Central Europeans, we were this first and second wave of enlargement, still trying to destroy the legacy of Soviet Union. When we entered the European Union, we saw something that surprised us so deeply. All those Western allies started to invest into autocracies, opening the markets to Russia's and China's, sharing technologies, naively thinking that you might change the minds of killers and thieves, criminals with money. Money? Money just gets them richer, empowers them, you feed the tiger, so one day tiger attacks you. They warned us in Bucharest in 2007